The water made no distinction between a king and a clerk. It knocked George Harrow unconscious with the same indifference it knocked him face down, which was technically fortunate for the breathing problem, though the sand crabs would have debated this on principle. The ship had been a merchant vessel, which meant no one on board had been expecting the reef. The captain had been cocky, the kind of cocky that came from years of running profitable routes without incident. The kind of cocky that made a man scan the horizon without seeing what was right underneath the bow. The reef had corrected this opinion with finality. Bess Thornton, who had been swimming when the ship came apart, reached the beach first. She had one advantage the waves didn't give her. She was already thinking 3 moves ahead. She'd been a clerk long enough to know that disaster followed patterns. Your ship breaks. You need water, shelter, food, in that order. You assess resources. You plan. You survive. The rest, the grief, the shock, the existential questions about the size of the ocean and the smallness of human life could be filed away in the section marked Later. She'd had practice with that section. It was where she'd filed Edmund Hale 2 years ago, the merchant's son with the easy laugh and the warm hands who'd hired her to run his father's books. Edmund, who'd asked her opinion on cargo routes and actually listened. Edmund, who'd brought her tea on late working nights and let his fingers brush hers when he took the cup back. Edmund, who'd courted her for 7 months while being engaged to the daughter of the wealthiest trader in the port city. She'd found out from a printed announcement nailed to the door of the exchange hall. Their engagement party had been the same evening he'd told Bess he couldn't imagine his life without her. She'd stood in front of that announcement for 4 minutes. She'd counted, then she'd gone back to the office, finished the quarterly reconciliation, and never spoken to him again. The lesson had been clean and mathematical. People lie, systems don't. Numbers hold their shape, trust the numbers. Inventory first. 1 shipwreck. 1 unconscious man, bleeding from a rib wound absolutely enormous. 1 dead. She didn't know this yet, but her body knew the wrongness of watching the merchant captain's body sink told her. 0 other survivors. 1 dress and 1 chemise, both now bandages. 1 island, probably temporary. 1 set of problems, probably mounting. She rolled him over and checked for pulse. There. Strong. She could smell the shift starting in his blood, that copper and heat scent that meant his wolf was already knitting him back together faster than human flesh could manage. Not instant. A day or 2, maybe longer. It would need binding to stay clean while it healed. She tore strips from her dress with methodical precision. He coughed. Seawater, sand. He opened his eyes and stared at the sky like it was supposed to answer a question. The others? His voice was rough. No. He didn't argue or cry or waste time pretending. He just closed his eyes for a beat, compartmentalized something vast, and opened them again. I'm George. Bess. Don't move. You're bleeding and you smell like the entire ocean. He looked up at her, sand in his hair, salt on his skin, a gash across his ribs, and smiled. The smile was unhurried, warm, and completely inappropriate for a man who'd nearly drowned. Most people at least tell me their last name before they start undressing me. She stared at him. I'm tearing bandages off my own clothing to stop you from bleeding to death. And I'm very grateful. You have excellent hands, by the way. You have a rib wound. I'm aware. Still nice hands. She pulled the bandage tighter than strictly necessary. He winced, but the smile didn't fade. Something about it, the ease, the reflex of it reminded her of Edmund, and she shut that thought down like a door slamming. She cleaned the gash with seawater, bound it tight with strips of wool, and helped him to his feet. He moved carefully but without panic, controlled, steady, the kind of man who'd been in pain before and knew it passed. He was tall. Very tall. Broad through the shoulders in a way that suggested actual physical power rather than vanity. He scanned the tree line the way she'd already scanned it: water, shelter, food, fire, and she felt a flicker of relief. He wasn't going to be dead weight. His eyes were green. They were also familiar in a way she couldn't quite place. She'd seen the royal coins. Of course, everyone had, but coins showed a formal profile with a crown and a specific angle of light. This was a sunburnt man covered in sand, which was quite different. Spring's that way, she said, pointing to a cluster of maidenhair ferns, groundwater. He looked where she pointed, then at her. How do you know that? Fern species indicate water table depth. My father ran cargo ships. I paid attention to things. Beautiful and useful, dangerous combination. I'm not a combination. I'm a person pointing at ferns. Walk. He walked, but he was grinning, and she could feel it on the back of her neck like sunlight. Deep inside, George his wolf stirred and spoke. She is fierce. She smells like salt and order. We approve. We approve very strongly. Why is she walking so fast? Follow her, keep up, don't lose sight of her. By sunset they had camp built. George raised the shelter A-frame, tight, angles perfect for rain runoff. Bess tested the lashings and found nothing to criticize, which frustrated her more than she had anticipated. She'd been looking forward to correcting him. He got fire going in 10 minutes flat. He knew what he was doing. Then he sat back, firelight catching his face, and looked at her across the flames with the expression of a man settling into a comfortable chair. So, Bess, who points at ferns? What's your story? I don't have a story. I have a profession. I'm a clerk. Everyone has a story. Mine involves ledgers. You'd fall asleep. Try me. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'm an excellent listener. People tell me this constantly. People are being polite. People are being accurate. I once listened to a man describe the history of anchor manufacturing for 3 hours. Voluntarily. Why? He was interesting. People are interesting when you let them be. His eyes hadn't left her face. I have a feeling you're very interesting when you let yourself be. The firelight was doing something to his features that she refused to acknowledge. She picked up a stick and poked the fire. I let myself be a clerk. That's interesting enough. It is, actually. Tell me about the ferns. I already told you about the ferns. Tell me again. I liked how your eyes changed when you explained it. My eyes didn't change. They absolutely did. They went from, this man is an inconvenience to, I know something brilliant and I'm about to share it. It was wonderful. She stared at the fire. She was not blushing. The fire was warm. Her face was warm because of the fire. That was the reason. Good night, George. Good night, Bess. A pause. For the record, the fern thing really was impressive. She turned away and lay down with her back to him and thought about Edmund Hale, who had also said she was impressive. Who had also known exactly how to make a compliment feel like a gift rather than a transaction. She pulled the word later over the thought like a blanket and went to sleep. Inside Bess, her wolf spoke quietly. He is warm. The fire is warm, but he is warmer. Stop thinking about the other one. The other one was wrong. This one we don't know yet, but he smells right. He smells like he means it. That first night he didn't sleep. She discovered this when she woke at dawn to find him sitting upright, hollow-eyed, with sand in his hair and an expression of existential grievance. The ground is wrong, he said. It's the ground. It's uneven and hard, and there's a root. Move off the root. I moved off the root. I found another root. I believe the island is entirely made of roots. Over the next 2 days, he built a sleeping platform, not a mat, not a pile of fronds, but actual furniture. Raised logs, smooth bamboo frame, woven palm surface. He spent 4 hours constructing it while Bess watched with her arms crossed. When she finally tested it that night, she had to admit, privately and violently and never out loud, that it was significantly more comfortable than the sand. Fine, she said. Fine what? Fine. The platform is acceptable. Just acceptable? He was leaning against the shelter post, arms folded, watching her test the platform with the expression of a man who already knew he'd won. Because you made a sound when you lay down. A very small, involuntary sound of comfort. I heard it. I made no sound. It was somewhere between a sigh and a purr, quite endearing. I do not purr. The evidence suggests otherwise. George, I'm just saying. If the platform is merely acceptable, I could take it apart, and we could go back to the ground. The roots are still there. Waiting. The platform stays. And the sound? There was no sound. Good night. He also started building a table. A small one, but a table nonetheless, legs and flat surface and everything. On day 4, she returned from checking fish traps to find him eating roasted clams off a flat piece of bark, sitting at his new table, in the middle of a tropical jungle, with the posture of a man dining at a moderately appointed restaurant. Deep inside George, his wolf spoke with baffled irritation. He is sitting on wood, eating off wood, surrounded by wood. Why is the wood important? We could eat this standing up in 4 seconds. Also, she is back. She is here. Look at her. He's looking at clams. Look at her. He looked up and saw her watching from the tree line. His face lit up. That was the only word for it. His entire expression reorganized itself around the fact of her presence, and he didn't bother hiding it. Bess! I made you a seat. I didn't ask for a seat. It has a backrest. I carved it. There's a slight curve for lumbar support. We're on a deserted island, which is precisely why we deserve furniture. Come sit with me. I'll even let you have the better clam. They're all the same clam. Not true. This one, he held one up with exaggerated reverence, is clearly superior. I've been saving it for you. She sat on the ground 3 feet away and ate her fish with her hands, directly off the bark, maintaining eye contact the entire time. His expression suggested she'd committed a small war crime. You're doing that on purpose, he said. I'm hungry. You're eating like a barbarian to make a point. I'm eating like a person. Not all people need table settings. You know. He tilted his head and gave her a look of such open, unapologetic admiration that she nearly dropped the fish. When you argue with me, your jaw does this thing. It sets. Like a little fortress gate coming down. It's magnificent. Stop looking at my jaw. I can't help it. It's right there on your face. She threw a clam shell at him. He caught it without breaking eye contact, which was infuriating. Inside Bess, her wolf paced restlessly. He is doing the thing again. The thing with his eyes. Stop looking at his eyes. We are eating. Eating is the task. Focus on the fish. The fish does not have green eyes. The fish is safe. She started building the system on the morning of day 2, while he was out looking for more bamboo. Zones. The firewood sorted by type and dryness, graded on a rock with scratch marks. The food stores sorted by perishability and by what would feed both the human and the wolf. That was the piece most people didn't understand. Shifters weren't simple. They were twice as hungry, twice as complex. A human body needed cooked food, regular meals, fuel for thought and work. A wolf body needed raw meat, the hunt, the kill, or at least the sustenance of it. If you didn't feed both, one would dominate, the human would grow weak, the wolf would demand to be let out to hunt, and you'd transform at the worst moment, in front of the wrong people, and everything would become a problem. She'd watched her father navigate this balance her entire life. The fishing supplies went in their own section because George would need them for the human, and then he'd need to shift and hunt for the wolf. He found her reorganizing the supplies when he returned. You've made a floor plan, he said. Not a question. It's a spatial allocation system. We don't waste time looking for things, and we need the human body fed properly. Both the wolf and the human need feeding. If the human body weakens too much, you get trapped in wolf form when you need to shift back. We have 9 items, which is exactly why we shouldn't lose any of them. She pointed to 2 marked storage areas. Vine structural, vine cordage, they have different applications. He opened his mouth and she braced for an argument. Instead, he walked the perimeter of her zones, studying each one. He crouched beside the food storage, examined her scratch mark grading system, and stood back up. The wolf and human feeding plan, he said. That's smart. My mother used to manage that for my father. He'd forget to eat as a human if she didn't put a plate in front of him. His expression softened. You remind me of her. She was the most capable person I've ever known. It was the first thing he'd said that wasn't wrapped in charm. It landed differently, a real thing, handed over without decoration. She didn't know what to do with it, so she pointed at the cordage vine. Structural vine needs to be at least thumb width and green. Cordage vine can be thinner and drier. Yes, ma'am. He gave her a mock salute. The charm was back, but underneath it, something had shifted. He sat on his precisely smoothed sleeping platform and ate his breakfast in his designated eating zone without another word. Deep inside George, his wolf stretched and considered the new arrangements. The food is where the food should be. The vine situation is organized. She has good instincts for territory. She also has very nice ears. The ears are not relevant to the vine situation. But they are nice. The crabs came on day 3 like an occupying force. 5 of them, plus one massive specimen. George named it the Admiral, because even on a deserted island he apparently needed to assign titles that took up residence in their shelter and refused to leave. It was the color of rust and malice, its shell the size of a dinner plate, and it had clearly evaluated the humans and determined them to be minor obstacles in its conquest of the island. It sat in the exact center of their sleeping area and clicked its claws with the serene confidence of a creature that had decided this was its home now. When George approached it to explain that he'd been using that exact spot first, the Admiral simply raised one claw and waved it at him like a dismissal. George tried to remove it by hand. The Admiral evicted George by clamping onto his thumb. The sound George made was not a word in any language. It originated somewhere below speech, a noise that communicated pure betrayal and also a moderate amount of pain. He shook his hand. The Admiral held on. He shook harder. The Admiral held on with the dogged determination of someone who had found a hill to die on. Deep inside George, his wolf lunged forward, absolutely murderous. Bite it back! We are apex predators. We do not get bitten by food. This is the worst day of our entire. He is still shaking the hand. Why is he still shaking the hand? Just bite it. Bite the thing. Bess, working on fish traps near the water, looked back and found him flailing his hand, the Admiral holding firm, his face a study in shock and agony. She walked over calmly, evaluated the angle of attack, and picked up a stick. She moved with precision, the way someone moves when they've seen their father handle animals that wanted to eat him. She gently prodded the Admiral's back leg with enough pressure to make a point but not enough to make it aggressive. It released George's thumb and swung toward her instead, which was exactly what she'd anticipated. Bess picked it up from behind the only safe angle, the vulnerable spot where its claws couldn't reach, and deposited it outside the shelter's perimeter with the gentle firmness of someone placing down a small, angry grandfather at a family gathering. That is a territorial claim, she said. It'll come back. We need to establish a perimeter. You want to build a crab-proof fence. I want to define a boundary the crab understands. It's a crab. It's a crab that beat you. George looked at his thumb, which was bleeding. He looked at the Admiral, who had already turned around and was heading back toward the shelter with the steady, implacable march of an occupying force. He looked at Bess. I have to be honest, he said. I've never been more attracted to someone in my life. You just got bitten by a crab. And you rescued me. With a stick. And calm hands. And no hesitation. He gestured vaguely at all of her. That's just incredibly. I moved a crab. You moved a crab with authority. There's a difference. Your thumb is still bleeding. Minor detail. Can we go back to the part where you saved me? I'd like to relive that. Sit down. Let me bind your thumb. And stop talking. Talking is how I process near-death experiences. A crab pinched your thumb. Near death. Final answer. She bound his thumb, and he watched her do it with an expression that made her stomach flip, which she ignored. He had gentle eyes. Edmund had had gentle eyes too. She finished the binding, stood up, and went back to the fish traps without looking at him. Inside Bess, her wolf spoke with strained patience. He is looking at us again. He is always looking at us. Stop liking it. We liked it when the last one looked. Remember how that ended. Remember the announcement on the door. Remember the quarterly reconciliation we finished with shaking hands. Do not fall for the green eyes. Do not. I'd like the record to show that I was taken by surprise, he called after her. I'll note it in the log. There's a log? She pulled out a flat piece of bark she'd been scratching notes onto since day one. It had dates, weather observations, food inventory counts, and a section labeled Incidents. The crab attack was about to become an entry. George stared at the bark log. You've been keeping records. Of course I've been keeping records. Someone has to track our signal effectiveness and rescue probabilities. He was quiet for a long moment. When we're rescued, someone will read that log and learn that we had a crab attack and a spatial allocation system. Historians will read the bark log. There will not be historians. There might be historians. There would, in fact, be historians, but neither of them knew that yet. On day 4, she came back from the spring to find him weaving something. Is that a napkin? She asked. It's a multi-purpose palm fiber pad. It has several applications. It's folded into a triangle. Triangles are structurally efficient. George. It could be a bandage. It could be a fire starter. It could be used to filter water. The fact that it also happens to be the correct size and shape for a napkin is entirely coincidental. She picked it up. It was soft. He'd beaten the fibers until they were almost cloth-like. There was a tiny, perfectly even hem along each edge. He had hemmed a napkin on a deserted island. By hand. You hemmed it, she said. Multi-purpose pads benefit from finished edges, prevents fraying. The silence stretched. He looked at her with the serene patience of a man who knew he'd won and was too polite to say so. Fine, she said, and put the napkin back. Fine, what? Don't push it, George. I would never push it. He paused. Would you like one of your own? I could monogram it. A B in the corner. Very distinguished. If you monogram a napkin on a deserted island, I'm sleeping on the beach. You'd come back. The platform is too comfortable. She hated that he was right. Deep inside George, his wolf spoke with immense satisfaction. She touched the napkin thing. She held it. Her face did something soft. He should make more things for her to touch and hold. Not the napkin. Something better, a rabbit. Bring her a rabbit. Wolves bring rabbits. This is known. The pelican arrived on day 6, landed on the shelter roof with all the grace of a creature that had never considered its own weight, and immediately vomited a fish onto her sleeping mat. She stared at the fish. She stared at the pelican. The pelican stared back with the vacant, slightly menacing expression of a creature that operated entirely on impulse. No, she said. The pelican threw up another fish. Absolutely not. George named it Harold. We are not naming the wildlife, Bess said. Harold has already been named. It's too late. If you name it, it stays. Harold stays regardless. He's chosen us. We should be honored. He was grinning that broad, unguarded grin that did things to her composure she refused to catalog. Besides, Harold clearly has taste. He delivered his finest fish directly to the most impressive woman on the island. I'm the only woman on the island. Hence, the most impressive one. Harold, at that exact moment, knocked a coconut off the ridgepole and onto the spot where Bess had been sitting 30 seconds earlier. She looked at the coconut, then up at Harold, who was cleaning a wing with absolutely no remorse. Harold is trying to kill me. Harold is providing for the family. Harold threw up on my records. George paused. He opened his mouth, and she could see the joke forming something about editing. He closed his mouth, opened it again. That's actually quite bad. Those records are important. The words landed wrong. She stared at him. He stared back, clearly aware he'd zigged when he should have zagged, trying to recover. I mean, Harold was probably... He stopped. I don't have anything for this one. You were going to say he was editing them. I was absolutely going to say he was editing them. And I'm glad I didn't because that would have been beneath both of us. She threw a palm frond at him. He ducked, laughing that warm, open, full-body laugh that she'd been carefully not noticing for days. Something flipped in her chest, warm, involuntary, unwanted. She knew this feeling. She'd felt it in a cluttered office 2 years ago when a man with gentle hands had passed her a cup of tea and let his fingers linger. She'd trusted that feeling then. It had led to an announcement on a door and a quiet night of reconciling numbers with trembling hands. She turned away before George could see her face and went to reorganize the coconuts by size, then by ripeness, then by whether they had visible damage. Then back to the original order, hands moving, until the feeling subsided enough to be ignored. Inside, Bess, her wolf paced in agitated circles. "You are sorting round things. Again. You sorted them yesterday. The round things have not changed. He is right there. He is laughing and warm and right there. But yes, we remember. The last one laughed too. The last one was warm too." And then the door and the announcement and the shaking. "So sort the round things. Sort them until it stops. We understand." By day 7, she and George realized something was happening. Harold would land on the ridgepole with zero grace and maximum volume, creating a distraction with noise and regurgitated fish, while the Admiral led a flanking maneuver on the food stores from the rocks. They timed it perfectly. "They're working together," George said, watching the Admiral drag an entire dried fish into its crevice while Harold stood guard overhead. "They have a strategy. They have a plan. I documented the first incident 2 days ago. It's in the log. The bark log. The bark log is the official record of this island. You know what I love about you?" He said it casually, like a man commenting on the weather, and her entire body went rigid. "You see a crab stealing fish, and your first response is to create a written record. That's extraordinary." "Don't say things like that." "Like what?" "What I love about you." "You don't know me." His expression shifted, the playfulness dimming into something more careful. "I know you keep records on bark. I know you grade firewood. I know you saved me from a crab with a stick and no hesitation. I know you learned about ferns from your father and you carry that knowledge like a gift. I know you eat fish with your hands and you look at me like I'm a problem you're trying to solve." He paused. "I'd like to be a problem you can't solve. Just to keep things interesting." She held his gaze for 3 seconds, she counted, and then looked at the ocean. "The crab is eating our reserves," she said. "We need a better cache." He let her change the subject. That was the thing about George. He pushed, but he always let her retreat. He never followed her past the line she drew. Edmund had done the same thing, a voice whispered. Edmund had been patient too, until he wasn't. Deep inside George, his wolf growled softly. She pulled away. She always pulls away. Someone hurt her, we don't know who. But if we find out, we will bite them. We will bite them very thoroughly. For now, patience. She comes closer each day. Patience. On day 7, George found a piece of metal in the wreckage, part of a buckle, flat and polished enough to catch light. "We can use this to signal ships," he said, holding it up with satisfaction. "The reflective surface is approximately 2 square inches, Bess said. The effective signaling range in optimal conditions is maybe 1.5 miles. We haven't seen a ship within 5 miles. Optimism, Bess. Math, George." He spent a full morning on the highest point of the island, angling the buckle at the horizon. After 2 hours, the only thing he'd signaled was a seagull, which circled twice and left. Deep inside George, his wolf watched the light flashing with diminishing patience. "We have been on this rock for some time now." He is waving Shiny at the water. "The water does not care about Shiny. Nothing out there cares about Shiny. Can we hunt now? Or at least go be near her? She is by the water. She is much more interesting than the Shiny. The technique is sound." He insisted that evening, sunburnt across both cheeks. "The technique is fine. The range is the problem." She had already sketched a plan for a signal fire on the bark log location. fuel requirements, optimal visibility angles, and was waiting for the right moment to introduce it. The right moment would be after he'd exhausted his mirror theory, because Bess had learned that George accepted new ideas more easily once he'd fully committed to and been defeated by his own. On day 9, George had been building a raft in secret. Not secret from Bess, secret from himself, because admitting he was building a raft meant admitting they might not be found. It was a beautiful raft, logs lashed tight, a rudimentary sail rigged from his shirt, which meant he was shirtless, which Bess was trying very hard not to notice and failing comprehensively, and an outrigger for stability. "It's too heavy," she said, standing on the beach, arms crossed. "It's structurally sound." "I didn't say it wasn't structurally sound. I said it's too heavy. The outflow at the southern point reverses during tidal shift, and if you launch in the next 2 hours, you'll be pushed directly back onto the reef." He looked at her. He looked at the water. He looked at the raft. "I'll wait for the tide," he said. He waited for the tide. Then he launched the raft. It cleared the reef break, caught the current beautifully, sailed approximately 200 yards, and then the lashings on the port side gave way simultaneously, the entire structure coming apart like a child's toy. His shirt, his sail, his hope fluttering away on the current like a flag of surrender. Deep inside George, his wolf surfaced, completely unconcerned. "We can swim. Why did we need the wood thing? The water is fine. We are in the water. This is fine. Swimming is simple. He overcomplicates everything. Also, she is on the beach. Swim toward her. Faster." George emerged from the surf, water streaming, and walked past Bess without speaking. His face was closed, his shoulders were carrying something she couldn't measure. "The knot type was wrong," she said to his back. "You used a clove hitch. You needed a round turn and 2 half hitches. The shearing force." "Not now, Bess." She gave him 10 minutes. On the 11th minute, she started explaining how to tie a proper maritime knot. He sat on the beach, shirtless and dripping, and she drew the diagrams on the bark, the knot geometry, the vector forces, the equations that proved why the clove hitch was functionally inadequate. "Show me," he said. She taught him knot theory on the beach while the sun went down. She taught him why angles matter and tension distribution matters, and why the wrong knot fails under load. She drew him diagrams. She made him sit on the sand at sunset and memorize rope mechanics. Halfway through, he stopped looking at the ocean and started looking at her. "What?" she said. "Nothing. Keep going. You're staring. You're teaching me knot physics at sunset, and your hair is doing something in the light, and I'm not made of stone." Bess. She lost her train of thought. This had never happened to her. She always had her train of thought. Her train of thought was bolted to tracks and ran on schedule. "Shearing force," she said, too loud. "Shearing force," he repeated, very softly, and she couldn't tell if he was talking about ropes anymore. Deep inside George, his wolf settled and spoke. She fixed the rope problem. The rope problem is solved. We still don't understand why he needed the wood thing when swimming was right there, but she is here and the bad feeling is gone, and that is enough, more than enough. She is everything. Inside Bess, her wolf pressed against the walls of her chest. He stopped looking at the water. He looked at US. The way he looks, it's not like the other one. The other one looked at what we could do. This one looks at who we are. But we said we wouldn't. We said. On day 10, they spent an entire morning arranging rocks on the beach to spell help in letters large enough to be seen from a passing ship. The tide came in that afternoon and washed away the bottom half of every letter, leaving behind what appeared to spell HFLF. George stared at it. "We should have accounted for the tide line," Bess said. "You mentioned the tide line while we were building it. Specifically, I said, are we sure this is above the high water mark? And you said, it'll be fine." I remember. And was it fine? HFLF. HFLF. He turned to her, and his face was doing the thing, that mixture of defeat and delight that she'd started to recognize as uniquely his. You know what, though? HFLF is a better distress signal. No one knows what it means. Ships would come closer, just out of curiosity. That's not how rescue works. It could be. What does HFLF mean, Captain? I don't know, but we'd better investigate. We've invented a new emergency protocol. She was not going to laugh. She pressed her lips together. He saw it, the suppressed almost laugh, and his face lit up like he'd won something Olympic. There it is, he said. There's nothing. You almost smiled. I saw it. Day 10 and I almost made Bess Thornton smile. I smile. I smile at appropriate times. Name one. When the fish traps work. That's satisfaction, not a smile. I want the real one. I'll earn it. Give me time. They rebuilt the rocks the next day, 20 feet further up the beach. It survived. No ships came. On day 11, everything shifted. The restlessness had been building skin wrong, bone deep. Bess had been ignoring hers, filing the itch away along with everything else, but by afternoon her hands shook, and she couldn't remember whether she'd already counted the dried fish twice. The sensation was almost painful. Her bones ached. Her teeth felt wrong. She needed to move. Her wolf needed to run. It had been days longer than she normally went, and the instinct was getting louder. Eventually, it would overrule her. Better to go now while it was still her choice. She walked into the jungle, found a clearing, and folded her clothes on a rock because she was Bess and she folded things, even when no one was watching. She shifted. The relief hit like a physical blow. The world cracked open into scent and sound and simplicity. She stretched, nose to tail, shook out her coat, a small, dark wolf, compact and quick, amber eyes catching the green light filtering through the canopy, and ran. Through the trees, along the ridge, paws on soft earth. Something inside her that had been clenched for days finally released. The human thoughts fell away. The careful distance she kept, the filing system, Edmund's ghost, the bark log, all of it dissolved into pure instinct and movement. She came around a stand of palms and stopped dead. He was already there, in wolf form, a massive, dark gray wolf, almost black along the spine, green eyes, those familiar green eyes watching her from a face that was unmistakably his. His clothes were folded on a rock too, less neatly than hers. They stared at each other. For a heartbeat, neither breathed. Then they ran. Side by side through the jungle, weaving between trunks, leaping over roots. He was faster in a straight line. She was quicker in the turns. They adjusted without thought, falling into sync like two notes finding the same chord. Inside Bess, her wolf sang not words, not thoughts, just the deep body recognition of rightness. The same feeling as a correct inventory. Everything in its place, him beside us, correct. Don't think, don't file, just run. Deep inside George, his wolf simply ran. No furniture, no table, no napkins, no pretense. Just the ground and the trees and her. For the first time since the island, our body makes sense. They ran until the stars came out, until the forest grew dark, and the world became shape and scent. They padded back to camp in easy silence, shifted in separate clearings propriety, even now, and neither mentioned it. Neither had to. But routine became sacred. Every dawn, they'd slip out of the shelter, walk to separate clearings, shift, find each other by scent, and run. In wolf form, there was no George the charming flirt and Bess the guarded clerk. Just a dark wolf and a gray wolf running through a green world. She'd nip at his flank when he got ahead. He'd shoulder her gently toward the easier path. They'd stop at the waterfall and drink side by side. Sometimes they'd just sit and watch the jungle wake up. One morning she found him already shifted, standing on the cliff on the north side, staring out at the open water. His ears were back. His posture was tight. Even in wolf form, she could read the tension. He was carrying something heavy. She patted over and pressed her side against his. He leaned into her, and they stood like that a long time, two wolves on a cliff, watching the horizon. She didn't know what he was looking at. She didn't know he was watching for the ships he dreaded, calculating the days, feeling the lie grow heavier with every sunrise he spent beside her. All she knew was the weight of his presence, the warmth of him, and that something was wrong and she couldn't fix it with a knot or a diagram or numbers written in a neat column. On day 6 of the wolf runs, she was crouched behind a boulder in wolf form, absolutely certain she was downwind. She crept forward, belly low, ears flat. She leaped and landed on empty sand. He was gone. She spun, confused, and something enormous and warm barreled into her from behind, sending her sideways into the surf. She came up sputtering, fur plastered flat, and found him sitting on the beach with his tongue out, radiating an innocence so false it was offensive. She shook herself off with immense dignity. She walked past him without acknowledgement. That was when she struck, launching herself at his back legs and sending him sprawling into the sand. He rolled twice and came up with sand on his nose and delight blazing in his eyes. They chased each other across the beach and into the shallows, splashing, rolling, mock wrestling. She was faster in the tight turns. He had raw power. They were evenly matched and neither cared about winning. That was a human concern. In wolf form, the wanting was simpler, to keep moving, keep playing, keep being together in this form where no words could lie. They chased until the stars came out, until they collapsed on the warm sand and she was curled against his side without remembering how she'd gotten there. His warmth covered her like a blanket. His heartbeat steady, alive, real, matched her own. Inside Bess, her wolf breathed out slowly. This is the safest we have ever been, safer than the office, safer than the numbers. He can't lie in this form. Wolves don't know how. This is true. Deep inside George, his wolf was still. She is here. She trusts us. In this form, she trusts us. We must never betray this. Never. He is going to betray this. We know he is. We can feel the lie in him like a bone that healed crooked, and when it breaks again, she will run. Not toward us. Away. On day 8, they found the bioluminescence pool. The waterfall had a hidden basin, fed by an underground spring, that glowed at night. When she shifted back and approached it in human form, she found the water alive with tiny organisms that turned every ripple into blue-green fire. George was already there, standing at the edge, his face caught in the glow. He looked at her, and for once, he didn't say anything clever. He didn't flirt. He didn't smile. He just looked at her in the blue-green light with an expression that was completely undefended. "You're beautiful," he said. Just that. Quiet and simple and stripped of every performance. "It's bioluminescent algae," she said. Her voice came out wrong, too soft, too close to something real. "Everything looks beautiful in bioluminescent algae." "That's not what I said." The silence held. She could hear the waterfall. She could hear her own heartbeat, which was doing something irregular that a clerk's heartbeat had no business doing. They shifted again, needing no words. In wolf form, the light was even more magical. It traced their fur in living fire as they waded in. The water was warm. The glow surrounded them, responding to their movement. She moved through the water slowly, watching the light follow her. He stood still, letting the luminescence settle around him, and when she pressed against him, the glow intensified, as if the water itself recognized what they were to each other. The barriers they'd both built their entire lives, his secret, her ledgers, Edmund's ghost, the crown she didn't know about, meant nothing here. Not in this light. Not in this form. Deep inside George, his wolf breathed, "She is here. The water knows. We know. This is enough. This will always be enough." Inside Bess, her wolf pressed closer. Not filing this away. Not categorizing it. Not putting it in a section marked later. Just being inside of it. Home. For one perfect moment, floating in blue-green light, they were not a man with a secret and a woman with a scar. They were recognized, known. Home. The next morning, back in human form, he brought her a coconut with a flower balanced on top. "Breakfast?" he said. "There's a flower on it." Presentation matters. We're stranded. Especially then. He cracked the coconut and held out her half. "Tell me something. Something real. Not ferns or inventory, something you. She took the coconut. The flower fell into the sand between them. She picked it up without thinking and put it behind her ear without thinking, and then realized what she'd done and reached to take it out. "Leave it," he said. "It's impractical." "Leave it, please." Something in the way he said please. She left it. "I was engaged," she said. She didn't know why she was saying it. The words came out like items from a drawer she'd opened by accident. Not engaged. Almost. There was a man. He was my employer. He was kind. Attentive. He said I was brilliant. He said he'd never met anyone like me. She stared at the coconut water. He was engaged to someone else the entire time. 7 months. I found out from a public announcement. George went very still. So when I say don't, when I pull away, it's not because I don't. She stopped. Reorganized. I was a tool. I was useful, and I was convenient, and when I wasn't needed anymore, I was discarded. He didn't even tell me to my face. I read it on a door. She took a breath. I reconciled the quarterly books that night. I finished the work. Because the numbers don't change their mind about you. The silence stretched. George set down his coconut half. Very carefully, very slowly, he reached out and took her hand. Not pulling, not insisting, just holding, the way you hold something fragile that you've been trusted with. "That man," he said, "was the stupidest person who has ever lived. And I say that with absolute confidence, as someone who just built a raft that exploded." She laughed. It came out before she could stop it, a real laugh, startled out of her, brief and bright. His face when he heard it, the way his eyes went wide and then soft, like he'd been given something he'd been waiting for, that was the moment she understood she was in real trouble. "There it is," he said quietly. "Day 12. I earned it." She didn't pull her hand away. She held it. His thumb traced a slow circle on her knuckle, gentle and unhurried and patient, and she let him, because the flower was behind her ear, and the sun was warm, and for the first time in 2 years, the section marked later felt very far away. Deep inside George, his wolf was trembling. She laughed. She laughed. It was the best sound. Better than running. Better than the water. Someone hurt her. We knew it. We knew someone had broken something in her. If we find him, we will bite him until there is nothing left to bite. But she laughed. She laughed, and she is holding our hand. Do not let go. Do not ever let go. Inside Bess, her wolf uncurled slowly from a tight, guarded ball. He is holding our hand. It is warm. The last one held our hand too. But the last one's hand always felt like it was reaching for something behind us. This one's hand is just here, holding. Not reaching. Just holding. Maybe. Maybe this time. On day 14, a sail appeared on the horizon. George lit the signal fire in 3 strikes, the fire Bess had planned days ago, built on the island's high point. Smoke billowed. He grabbed her, spun her, laughing. We made it. She kissed him. It was brief and fierce, and it tasted like salt and relief and goodbye, though she didn't know that yet. He kissed her back with both hands in her hair, and his whole body leaning into her like she was the shore he'd been swimming toward for 14 days. The longboat hit the sand. A tall man leaped out, locked eyes on George, and dropped to one knee in the surf. "Your Majesty, thank the moon." 3 men followed. 4 men kneeling, heads bowed. The world stopped. "Your Majesty," she repeated, flat, dead. "Bess, your Majesty. Let me explain." She stepped back. "You're the king of the Silverwood Dominion, the man on the coins." She'd held those coins. Everyone had. That formal profile, that specific angle of light, the crown weighing down a face that had never learned to smile. She'd seen it 1,000 times and never recognized him. Because this man, shirtless and covered in sand, arguing about coconuts and napkins and calling her beautiful in bioluminescent light, that profile could never be the same person. "You said your name was George. It is my name. And you let me believe you were just a merchant. You let me build a spatial allocation system for a king." You let me explain knot theory to a king. You're the alpha of alphas, and I critiqued your coconut technique. Her hands were shaking. She locked them together. You flirted with me. Every single day. You told me I was beautiful. You held my hand. You listened to me tell you about Edmund, about the man who lied to me, and you sat there and you listened and you were doing the exact same thing. The color left his face. I told you, she said, and her voice cracked for the first time. I told you that someone had lied to me before. I told you I was a tool. I told you about the announcement on the door. And you looked at me with those eyes and you held my hand and you let me believe this was different. It is different. It's identical. She was shaking now. You knew I was afraid of exactly this and you did it anyway. Every compliment, every look, every time you called me beautiful or said you were earning my smile, you were earning it under a false name. I gave you something I swore I'd never give anyone again and you took it while lying to my face. He looked like the island was sinking beneath him. Everything on this island was real, he said, except who you are. She turned and walked to the longboat. Her voice was perfectly steady now, the way it had been steady the night she'd reconciled Edmund's books. The numbers don't change their mind about you. I assume there's room for a passenger. The soldier looked at George. George looked destroyed. Give her whatever she needs, he said. She climbed in without looking back. She sat in the stern with her hands folded and her back straight and looked at the horizon, which was empty and blue and told her nothing. She could feel him behind her. She didn't turn. Behind her, the king stood on the beach where they'd argued about coconuts and built furniture and chased crabs and run as wolves through the green and gold. Marcus approached carefully, the way one approaches a wounded animal. George, we need to go. I know. He didn't move. He bent and picked up a piece of silvered driftwood smooth, the length of his forearm. He'd been carving it at night while she slept, shaping it into something. It wasn't finished. It would never be finished now. He put it in his pocket and walked to the boat. Deep inside George, his wolf howled long, low, the sound of something tearing. She is leaving. She is in the boat and she is not looking at us. We did this. He did this. We told him. We told him the lie was a crooked bone. Now it has broken and she is leaving and the world is wrong. Every direction is wrong. Run after her. We can't run after her. She doesn't want us. She doesn't want us because he lied. He lied, and now the running is over, and the light is gone, and the gap beside us will never be filled again. Bess did not speak on the voyage home. Not a word. She was given a cabin and she stayed in it. Food was brought. She ate mechanically, with her hands, and thought of his napkin and his careful posture and the way he'd looked at her when she ate off the bark with her fingers like she was committing a crime against civilization. She thought of the flower behind her ear. She thought of his hand holding hers, the slow circle on her knuckle. She thought of him saying that man was the stupidest person who has ever lived while being exactly the same kind of man. No, worse. Because Edmund had never known about her fear. George had known. She'd handed him the map to her most vulnerable place, and he'd walked right into it. When the ship docked, she left before the crowds. She didn't take the purse Marcus offered. She didn't take the gown. She went home to the apartment above the bakery with a torn dress, salt in her hair, and the bark log tucked inside her bodice, because she had grabbed it before leaving the island without thinking. 3 weeks passed. She opened the mercantile at 7. Reconciled accounts. The numbers were clean. Everything was in order. She did the work. She was good at work. Work was safe. She did not shift. Her skin felt wrong. Her bones ached in a way that had nothing to do with injury. The wolf paced inside her, demanding, furious, and she held the door shut through force of will alone. On the 18th night, her body overruled her. She walked to the park at the edge of the city and shifted behind the old oaks. The relief was immediate and devastating. She stretched into her wolf form and the world opened up scent and sound and the cool grass under her paws, and she ran. 3 strides in, she veered left to make room for a wolf that wasn't there. She stopped, looked at the empty space beside her. The space was exactly the width of a large, dark gray wolf. Her legs had adjusted automatically, her body making room for a presence so deeply learned that 18 days of absence hadn't unwritten it. She'd adjusted her stride. She'd left a gap. She stood in the dark park and stared at the gap and understood, with the mathematical clarity she applied to everything, that she was ruined. The numbers were simple. 1 wolf plus 1 wolf equaled something that could not be divided back into ones. She'd run the calculation 100 times, and it always came out the same. Inside Bess, her wolf stood in the gap where he should have been. The grass is cold, the space is wrong. Every direction is wrong because none of them lead to him. We are broken. Not like before was a crack. This is the whole structure coming apart. The round things cannot be sorted. The numbers do not help. He is not here, and we are not whole, and no amount of filing will fix this. She shifted back behind the oaks and walked home with shaking hands. She did not shift again. The wolf stopped asking. The wolf just closed the door and waited. On the 4th Wednesday, she came home in the rain to find the king of the Silverwood Dominion sitting on her kitchen floor, ordinary clothes. Shadows under his eyes. Unshaved, sitting on the floor because she only had 1 chair. The lock was easy, he said. I couldn't stay away anymore. Everything came up like a tide. Get out. Bess, get out of my apartment. 5 minutes. You had 14 days. To tell me the truth. Every single day, you chose the lie. Every compliment. Every touch. Every time you said something that made me feel... She stopped. Drew a breath like pulling a blade. You knew. I told you about Edmund. I sat across from you and handed you every broken piece, and you held my hand, and you were doing the same thing he did. I wasn't. You were charming. You were patient. You were kind. You let me come to you at my own pace. You made me laugh. You made me feel safe. And it was built on a lie, just like before. Exactly like before. It's not the same, it's worse. Her voice broke. Edmund didn't know he was repeating a pattern. You did. You sat there and watched me tell you I'd been deceived before and you did nothing. You could have told me. Right then, when I told you about the announcement on the door, you could have said, Bess, there's something I need to tell you. But you held my hand and you said he was the stupidest man alive, and you didn't say a word. George was white. His hands were shaking. You're right, he said. That moment, that was when I should have told you. I knew it then. I felt it. And I was too afraid of losing you to do the right thing. Silence. Rain on the window. I ran away on a ship because I wanted to feel like no one, he said. A foreign merchant vessel, a crew from a distant territory who wouldn't know my face. Every person in my life wants something, my signature on a treaty, my approval on a policy, my presence at a function. I washed up on a beach, and a woman told me not to move and looked at me like I was just a person, not the king, not the alpha, just a man who was bleeding. I couldn't give that up. It was selfish. It was wrong. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. That's not good enough. I know. That's an explanation, not a defense. I know. He looked at the floor. I don't have a defense. I have a reason, and the reason is that I fell in love with you on day 2 when you classified Vine by structural function, and I was terrified that if you knew who I was, you'd stop being yourself around me. Everyone stops being themselves around me. Everyone performs. You were the first person in my life who told me my coconut technique was wrong. It was wrong. I know, and I needed that. I needed someone who'd tell me my raft was too heavy and my knots were wrong and my HFLF was a disaster. I needed you to be real with me. And the only way I could get that was by lying, and the lie cost me the one real thing I've ever had. She sat on the floor next to him, not because she'd forgiven him, because her legs were tired and the chair was broken and the floor was where he was. Their shoulders touched the first time in weeks, and the relief of it was almost painful. His hand found hers, and she didn't pull away. She could feel the tremor in his fingers, genuine, uncontrolled, real. He was terrified. What you did is not what Edmund did, she said slowly. Edmund used me. You were still wrong. You were very wrong, but you weren't using me. I know the difference. She paused. It still broke something. I know. It broke something that was just starting to heal. I know. His voice was hollow, and I still couldn't let you go. I still can't. I climbed out a window. 3rd floor. There was a trellis. It broke. I fell into the rose garden. There was blood. Mine, mostly. The guards heard the noise. I told them I'd been sleepwalking. She closed her eyes. You climbed out a palace window. I didn't think. I just couldn't be in the corridors anymore without you. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't eat. I couldn't shift because my wolf was pacing the same walls and howling your name. No more lies, she said. Ever. About anything. Not even small ones, not even kind ones. I promise you, on everything I am, if you ever lie again, I'm auditing every financial record the Crown has ever produced. And I will find something. I believe you completely. The rain kept on. The building creaked. The old radiator ticked. Hi, she said. Hi, he said. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. It was the opposite of an ending. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. Deep inside George, his wolf roared back to life. She is here. She came back. Not all the way. Not yet. But she is here, and her hand is in ours, and the gap is closing. We will earn the rest. We will earn it every day. We will never lie again. Wolves don't lie. He lied. We will make sure he doesn't again. Whatever it takes. Inside Bess, her wolf finally stirred from the dark place where she'd been waiting. Not running away. Not counting. Not filing. Not hiding behind the numbers. Just here, with the one who fit in the gap. It still hurts. The crack is still there. But he is here. And home is not a place. Home is this. Cracked and imperfect and here. 6 months later. The king of the Silverwood Dominion had a significant problem. His mate had reorganized the palace. Not a room, the entire palace. She'd started with the kitchen spice storage and expanded into every office, every archive, every closet. She'd created a system, labeled everything. Cross-referenced, Marcus sat down with the expression of a man who has witnessed something he cannot unsee. She reorganized the entire diplomatic filing system, Marcus said, by hand. In one afternoon, we found 3 duplicate treaties we didn't know we had, and a filing cabinet containing nothing but other, smaller filing cabinets, nested inside each other. Nested filing cabinets. Nested filing cabinets. Marcus closed his eyes. She's currently working on the Crown accounts. George asked if she'd documented the system. Your Majesty, she's created a filing system for the filing system. Is it effective? Marcus opened his eyes. It's terrifying. The bark log sat on the bedroom nightstand, next to a piece of silvered driftwood that was finally finished. He'd completed it their second night back, a small, intricate sculpture, abstract, a curved shape that somehow captured the exact feeling of her beside him in wolf form. Next to it sat a pressed flower. The one she'd put behind her ear on day 12, the one that had fallen in the sand. He'd picked it up when she wasn't looking, and kept it in his pocket for 6 months. When she found it, tucked inside the driftwood like a secret, she'd stared at it for a long time and then very quietly put it on the nightstand without a word. He hadn't said anything. Some things don't need decorating with charm. They drove to the coast on a clear evening. Their custom now, Marcus had stopped protesting and started scheduling security rotations around it. They shifted separately propriety and met on the sand. She nipped his ear. He huffed. They ran along the shore, through the dunes, up the bluff. She was quicker in the turns. He was faster on the stretches. They adjusted to each other the way they always had, since an island that now existed only in memory and bark and finished driftwood. They stopped on the highest point of the bluff, watching the world expand before them, coast falling away, city lights beginning to glow, dark water stretching to the horizon. The wind came from the ocean, salt and spray and the smell of open water. She pressed against his side, and he rested his massive head on her back, the weight of him not burdensome but grounding. No secrets, no lies, no more pretense, just two wolves on a bluff watching the ocean turn dark. Deep inside George, his wolf was content, running, together, no napkins required. She is here, we are here, the lie is gone, the crooked bone healed straight this time, this is all we need, this is everything. Inside Bess, her wolf watched the horizon. Everything in its place, him beside us, correct. The crack healed. Not invisible, we can still feel where it was, but healed, strong. Filed under permanent. Somewhere on an ocean current, a coconut with coordinates inside it was washing toward a distant shore. It had survived 6 months of currents and tides. A fisherman would find it. The fisherman's wife would read it. The harbor master would study it. A cartographer would publish it. Historians would follow the trail. Bess had planned this. She'd logged it. The coordinates were accurate to within a degree. The bark log was next to the finished driftwood on their nightstand. Soon, historians would read both. They would read about crabs and pelicans and a woman who kept meticulous records on bark. They would read about a king who didn't have a name and a clerk who gave him one. They would read about a man who flirted with a woman every single day for 2 weeks, and a woman who pretended not to notice, and a lie that nearly ruined everything, and a kitchen floor where it started to mend. But that was a story for another evening, another coast, another time when the world was organized, and there were no more lies between them, just a dark wolf and a gray wolf running side by side toward a horizon that no longer meant escape. It meant home. 3 years later. The pup's name was Wren. She was 2.5, dark-haired, green-eyed, and had already reorganized the royal nursery twice, once by color and once by what she called the good ones and the bad ones. A classification system that placed her wooden wolf figurine and a stolen kitchen ladle in the first category and everything else, including the bed, in the second. She had George's smile. She had Bess's jaw, the little fortress gate. And she had, to the quiet horror of the palace staff, inherited both of her parents' most alarming qualities simultaneously: her mother's compulsion to organize and her father's insistence on doing so with furniture. She'd built a shelf. Out of blocks. In the hallway. At shin height. Marcus had walked into it in the dark at 6 in the morning and said a word that the Queen later made him apologize for in writing. But the thing that George would tell people about for the rest of his life, the thing that made Bess laugh so hard she had to sit on the floor, happened on a Tuesday. They'd taken Wren to the coast. Their coast, the bluff where they ran. Wren couldn't shift yet, too young. That would come later, but she loved the beach with the fearless, total commitment of a toddler who believed the ocean was a very large bath. Bess was sitting on a blanket, watching Wren stack shells into a tower sorted by size. George was beside her, legs stretched out, looking at the water with the expression of a man who had, against considerable odds, gotten everything he wanted. "She's sorting them," he said. "Of course she's sorting them. By size. She has good instincts. She's 2. Early competence is a gift, George." Wren finished her tower, studied it with grave satisfaction, and then turned to the rock pool beside the blanket to find more shells. She crouched, reached in, and something reached back. The crab was enormous, rust-colored, one claw significantly larger than the other. It sat in the rock pool with the ancient, immovable confidence of a creature that had been alive for a very long time and had opinions about boundaries. Bess went still. "George, I see it. That's not it? Can't be." It was. Or if it wasn't, it was a relative so identical in temperament that the distinction was meaningless. The crab raised its larger claw at Wren with the exact gesture, the exact dismissal that the Admiral had used on George 3 years ago on an island 500 miles south. Wren stared at the crab. The crab stared at Wren. Then Wren, 2.5 years old, daughter of the most organized woman in the kingdom, and the most stubborn king in recorded history, reached around behind the crab with her other hand, picked it up from the back the way her mother had once picked up the Admiral, and gently set it on the sand outside the rock pool. The crab sat there, stunned. It had never been handled before. Not like that. Not with calm, efficient, small hands that knew exactly where the claws couldn't reach. Wren patted it on the shell. "Bad one," she said, with her mother's tone of professional assessment. Then she went back to sorting shells. George stared at his daughter. He stared at Bess. He stared at the crab, which was still sitting on the sand in what appeared to be existential shock. "She did the thing," he said. "She did your thing, the behind-the-crab thing. I didn't teach her that. Did you teach her that?" "I didn't teach her that. She's 2. She has good instincts." I said this. George lay back on the blanket, covered his face with both hands, and started laughing. Deep, full-body, helpless laughter, the kind that made his shoulders shake and his eyes water. Bess watched him with her arms crossed and her jaw set, and then the fortress gate cracked, and she was laughing too, the real laugh, the one he'd spent 14 days earning and now heard every day and never got tired of. Wren ignored them both. She had shells to sort. The crab, recovering its dignity, marched sideways down the beach with the measured retreat of a general who had chosen to cede this particular territory not because it had lost, but because it had recognized superior forces. That evening, back at the palace, Bess found Wren in the nursery. She'd gotten hold of a flat piece of bark from the garden, probably, stripped off the old oak by the fountain and was scratching marks on it with a rock. "What are you making, love?" "Log," Wren said. Bess knelt down. The marks were not legible. They were not letters or numbers. They were, however, arranged in very neat rows. "What's it a log of?" Wren held up the bark and pointed to the first row of scratches. "Good ones," she said. She pointed to the second row. "Bad ones." Bess took the bark. She held it. She looked at the nursery, the reorganized shelves, the block shelf in the hallway, the wooden wolf in the good ones pile, the ladle beside it, and she pressed the bark to her chest. She carried it to the bedroom and set it on the nightstand, next to the original bark log, next to the finished driftwood, next to the pressed flower from day 12. George found her there an hour later, sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at the 2 bark logs side by side. "She made a log," Bess said. "A log." "A bark log. She found bark and she made a log. She's cataloging the nursery." George sat down beside her. He looked at the 2 logs, one weathered, salt-stained, covered in precise handwriting that had once tracked coconuts and crabs and the days of falling in love. The other new, small, covered in the earnest, illegible marks of a child who had inherited her mother's certainty that the world made more sense when you wrote it down. Deep inside George, his wolf spoke, very quietly. "There are 2 logs now. The small one cannot read or write yet, but she sorts things and she handles crabs and she knows what matters. She is the best of both of us. She is everything." Inside Bess, her wolf curled around something warm and whole, filed under permanent. All of it, the logs, the crab, the pup, him. No section marked later anymore. There is only now. She classified the crab as a bad one, George said. Accurate. Harsh, but accurate. Bess leaned into him. He put his arm around her. The 2 bark logs sat side by side on the nightstand, one old and one new, both keeping careful records of a world that made more sense when someone bothered to write it down. Outside, the ocean did what it always did, knocked things over, carried things forward, made no distinction between kings and clerks and small girls who sorted shells by size. But inside the palace, everything was organized, everything was labeled, everything was exactly where it should be. Even the crab knew it.